There are lots of feminist videos out there where you get someone saying something stupid, and a lot of people gather around and point and laugh, but the feminists never learn from these experiences because, let's be honest, they just don't care. In that, they're very much like the religious, and feminism, at least the more toxic radical versions, is very much a left-wing social religious movement born out not of rationality and critical thinking, but of uncontrolled emotion and unfettered delusion. So I came across this video of a young feminist making a lot of the same old tired absurd claims, but at least she does it all in the same place, so it can all be refuted all in one convenient location. So, let's get started.
Hey guys, it's Lizzie. So today I'm going to talk about feminism and why I'm a feminist, and we're going to start with some definitions. Feminism is a movement for equality between men and women politically, economically, and socially. If you think that women should be treated the same as men in being allowed to run for office and vote, in getting paid the same amount for the same job, and if you think of women as having equal worth to men and being equally capable as men, then you're a feminist.
To begin, she puts up all kinds of trigger warnings and disclaimers, but since I couldn't care less about her language or who it might offend, I cut all that out. If you really want to know, the link to the original video is below. Anyhow, say hello to Lizzie. Hi, Lizzie. She's young and very confused, as most feminists are. She starts off with the faulty claim that feminism is about equality for all. It is not. The definition of feminism is the advocacy of women's rights on the grounds of political, social, and economic equality to men. It's not about equality for all. It's about equality for women. Period. If you want to know what term means equality for all, that word is egalitarianism. We've been over this before in other videos, but feminists are so attached to their word that they have no interest in being linguistically correct. As for her quick list of claims, all of those have been completely and totally disproven and discredited, but don't let the fact that she's spewing nonsense stop her. She doesn't really care. But we'll come back to those later on.
I think in general, feminism is a movement that's empowering everyone, men and women, to stop viewing people based upon their gender and like putting them in a box and being like, because you're a woman or because you're a man, you're this, and instead just viewing every single person as a unique individual.
Nothing could be further from the truth. If you want to treat everyone as an individual, regardless of their gender, you have to have a gender-blind system. You cannot constantly and incessantly point out everyone's gender and keep track of quotas and play the kind of mindless games that feminists play. In fact, if you want to know who's really sexist, it's the feminists. They don't want a gender-blind system because if they had a gender-blind system, there'd be no need for feminism. Think about it.
The progressive movement of the late 19th and early 20th century made a lot of social changes, and one of those was the women's suffrage movement. In 1920, the 19th Amendment was ratified, and that gave women the right to vote. Right now, women can vote in every country except for Saudi Arabia and Vatican City.
Funny, two of the most religious places on the planet are the only ones that don't allow women to vote. I say it's funny because, in another video, Lizzie here tells us that she's religious, and, at least within the past year or two, she was completely against gay equality and gay marriage. Now, she says she stopped opposing gay marriage, and I commend her on that, but she still doesn't condemn religion, which is almost solely responsible for anti-gay sentiment worldwide. Equality my ass.
Something else to think about politically is that there's a massive underrepresentation of women in our government. Women occupy 19.3% of the House seats and only 20% of Senate seats. We've never had a female president, and only 3 of the 9 Supreme Court justices are women. 2 of them were recently added within the past 10 years. Because there's so few women who are in elected office positions, it's sending this subliminal message to young girls and even to women who are my age that men do leadership positions, that men run the government. I don't think it's that women don't want to run for office. I think it's just that we're taught growing up that that's not really what women do.
Now, I'm going to show you why what she said is really, really stupid, especially based on something else she said not 30 seconds ago. Women gained the right to vote in the U.S. in 1920, almost 100 years ago. That means that women, who make up more than 50% of the American population and who have had the right to vote for their representatives for almost a century, are overwhelmingly voting for men. Nobody's holding a gun to their head. No one is forcing them to vote against their gender politics. They are choosing, apparently of their own free will, to do so, and now it's something that feminists are complaining about. What, do women have no agency? Are women stupid? How do they explain this? Oh wait, it's the patriarchy, it's gotta be. And then we go on to the Supreme Court. Do you want to know why there are fewer women on the court? Because women are not well represented in the legal profession, and that's where all the justices come from. Women make up only 34% of lawyers in America, even though almost half of all law degrees go to women. That means that women are choosing to leave the field at a much higher rate than men. And whose fault is that?
The reason that we need feminism is that sexism is something that we're socialized to accept as young children, and we grow up having these preconceived notions about the world and about gender roles that aren't true. And it's this vicious cycle where young girls are not seeing females in these leadership positions as much, and then they think that that's not even an option for them or something that they want to aspire to. And so what feminism does is it kind of comes in and it messes up that cycle of inequality.
Yeah, not so much. The fact is, there are biological differences between the genders, and all the whining and moaning in the world isn't going to change that. There are things that women choose to do at a rate much higher than men, and things that men choose to do at a rate much higher than women. There are things that women are much more capable of doing than men, and vice versa. These are not gender roles. This is a recognition of reality. Physically, men are just stronger on average than women. In cases where women have fought to be included in traditionally male-dominated, physically challenging roles, the standards have had to be relaxed so that women can get through the grueling physical rigors of the job. That's not some social gender role at play. It's a fact of biology, but we will come back to this again later.
So I think that this is the most simple one. It's basically just that females should get paid the same amount as males for doing the same job.
Then it's a good thing they already do. See, this has been a feminist lie for a very long time, and it's about time we set the record straight. The claim that women make only 77% of what men make is completely untrue. It comes from a study that studies female wages in aggregate against male wages in aggregate. It doesn't compare apples to apples, the same people doing the same jobs under the same circumstances and finding that women are making less. In fact, in a lot of situations, women make more than men doing exactly the same jobs. It's a fact that women choose to go into lower paying fields. And even in the same fields, they tend to work less hours, take more time off, and not climb the corporate ladder as fast as men do. This isn't sexism. This is a choice that women make freely because women are, by and large, looking for different things than men. They can choose to do it differently. They just don't.
In the United States, and I'm sure it's even worse in developing countries and in other parts of the world, we make 78 cents to every dollar that men make. To put this into like a real picture of something that happened, there's a movie that came out called American Hustle, and the movie company is Sony, and they accidentally had their economic tax records leaked out, and we found out that the female leads of the movie, Jennifer Lawrence and Amy Adams, were paid less than their male co-stars, just because they're female.
No, because they aren't the same kind of box office draw that the male stars were. Actors get paid based on star power and the ability to get people into theaters. Christian Bale is a much bigger name. That's why he gets top billing on the movie. Try again.
This same company has two co-presidents of production, so it's the same exact job, and they have one female and one male working it. And the female, who's the co of this guy, makes $1 million less than him a year, just because of her gender.
And where do you get this information? How do you know it has anything to do with her gender and not how much money each of them has been responsible for bringing to the studio? How do you know that it isn't that one person has had more longevity with the company or a superior resume? Nope, it has to be sexism because one has a penis and the other has a vagina. This is what's called confirmation bias. They are looking at everything from the perspective of sexism, and that is a logical problem.
Social equality. So this is the biggest one that I see talked about in the media and in the news. It's just the sense that women are viewed as being inferior to men. And you might even think that you don't know anyone who even still believes that or who lives that out. But just think of our language. When a guy is trying to insult another guy, he'll say, "Don't be a sissy." And then they have a lot of other derogatory words to call men that are like equating a man to a woman. That's the worst insult, to call a guy a woman. And it shouldn't be like.
Except that's not true. I went looking online for insulting names for men and couldn't find a list anywhere that suggested equating them with women. You could call men dicks and assholes and scumbags and all kinds of other things. The only things I found that had anything to do with gender of a sort were insults related to homosexuality. Nobody is going to call a guy a bitch. That's just stupid. Besides, all the insults she had listed behind her are specifically things that people call women. Make up your mind, Lizzie.
Another part of social inequality is that women are constantly objectified. In advertisements, music videos, pornography, women are sexualized. And I don't have a problem with sexualizing women. I understand that we all are sexual beings, but the problem is that women are being sexualized way more than men. Our sex appeal is used as a means to an end, and it's very demeaning because it's telling men that they are supposed to see women as people, as objects to have sex with, instead of sending a message that men and women are equal sexually, the message that the Bible shows. And we should think of sex as something that makes us equal, that we come together and we're equal in sex, rather than the man being more powerful and the man getting pleasure from the woman. All of that is just very objectifying, and I think that it's horrible, the messages that we send to girls where we have to be sexy.
Yet she ignores all the places that media and advertising aimed at women do exactly the same thing with men. You can find tons and tons of advertising featuring shirtless, muscle-bound men, and feminists don't say a word. The fact is, the whole point of advertising is to appeal to your target audience by providing things that your target audience wants. Sex, as they say, sells. So for products aimed at men, you're going to see sexualized women, and for products aimed at women, you're going to see sexualized men. Welcome to the real world. Oh, and trying to use the Bible, one of the most sexist books of mythology out there, to defend sexual equality? Are you serious?
This is something that leads to females having so many insecurities, and I think that, of course, everyone has insecurities, but men experience far less eating disorders and disordered eating behavior than women do, and one of the reasons is because we're objectified so much.
Sorry, but that's your problem. If you're going to insist that you match up with the body images in advertisements, then you've got some serious psychological issues. Sure, there are some men who do the same thing, but by and large, we're secure enough with ourselves that we just don't care. We're not shallow. Maybe you ought to try it.
Number 3 is that we're taught that we need a man and that we need to find our value in a relationship with a guy. Embracing feminism doesn't mean you're against relationships or against getting married. I'm a feminist, but I definitely want to get married. I want to have kids. I want to find value in a relationship with a guy. What's wrong is telling women that we need a guy and that we're not worthy or valuable just in finding our value in ourselves and in a relationship with God. I think that feminism is such a beautiful movement because it just really empowers everyone to see each other for what they are worth rather than for how they look or like fitting them into this mold of what their gender says that they are.
But men get the exact same thing. If they're not in a relationship, people think there's something wrong with them. They tell men that they have to settle down and provide for a family. I think there's a significant amount of cognitive bias going on here. Lizzie has been told that all of these things are true, and she has virtually no life experience, so she buys into it hook, line, and sinker. Hopefully, as she ages, she'll actually grow up, but there's an unfortunate number of feminists who never do.
Sexual harassment and rape culture is another part of social inequality that is disgusting and terrifying. Rape culture is the idea that no means yes, that when a woman is telling a man, no, I don't want to have sex, or when she hasn't consented verbally that she wants to have sex, he assumes that she definitely wants it. Also, I am a college student and we were taught coming in as freshmen, we went through this like kind of class on how to not get raped and how at a party to like make sure that we're like looking out for other females, and that's taught so much more than just explaining what consent is to everyone, that verbal yes means yes regarding sex. I'm gonna link some articles below, but I've read so many articles on how universities do not take rape allegations seriously, and even when a woman has evidence, like she went to a rape center and she has like the DNA evidence that this guy did rape her, the guys will still not get kicked out of the university, and sometimes it's because they're an athlete, sometimes it's because the university doesn't want to get a bad rep, but the reality is that we're just not taking things like this seriously.
Wow, you're completely out of the loop, aren't you? There are universities out there right now that are forcing all male incoming students to take classes on how not to rape, whether they want to take them or not. Of course, feminists dramatically overplay the prevalence of rape on campuses anyhow. They claim that 20% of women will get raped when the actual numbers are somewhere around 0.61%. Further, just the accusation of rape is enough to get people thrown off campuses, even if there's no evidence that anything ever actually happened. False rape accusations are rampant, with women screaming rape after consenting to the act because they changed their mind retroactively. While any amount of rape at all is entirely unacceptable and must be dealt with, shouldn't women lying about rape be equally reprehensible? Well, not to feminists who routinely defend women who out and out lie about having been assaulted.
And I think it's really important to put rape culture in the bigger global picture of domestic violence that women experience all over the world. 30% of women in rural Bangladesh reported that their first sexual experience was forced. Also, globally, 30% of women report to have experienced physical or sexual abuse from their partner who they're in a relationship with. And 35% of women in the world have experienced sexual violence or been raped in their lifetime.
Well, guess what? There are more male victims of domestic violence than there are female victims, and more than 40% of all severe domestic violence is done against men. Further, men are more likely to have psychological aggression and control over sexual or reproductive health. But where women have rape crisis centers, men get nothing. Now, I'm sure Lizzie's totally unaware of this because feminists just don't talk about the real facts. They just toe the party line because they don't really give a damn about equality. They only care about the rights and issues of women.
130 million women in the world have been forced to go through genital cutting, which occurs mainly in Islamic countries, and it prevents women from being able to find pleasure in sex.
But apparently, she isn't at all concerned that the overwhelming majority of men worldwide undergo male genital mutilation in the form of almost universal circumcision. But yes, as awful as it is that relatively few women get this done against their will, there's no concern at all about what happens to men. Is anybody surprised?
And this is something that was really shocking and sad to me, which doesn't just take place in China, but in China, there's 39,000 baby girls who weren't taken care of in their first year of life and died because of that. I'll link the news story below that talks about like this national pandemic, but there's like millions of girls that aren't alive right now because their parents didn't think them worthy of medical care that like a boy baby would deserve. Also, so many female babies are aborted because they are female babies, and so you could go on and on and on to talk about like all the statistics of how women are seen as inferior to men and less valuable than men, and because of that we're being abused, raped, killed, not taken care of, allowed to die. Luckily, in the part of the world that I live in, the United States, I feel like women are seen as more valuable.
And yes, it is a shame that such things happen, but in places where a matriarchy has been the cultural norm, the exact same thing happens to men, and you're just not at all concerned. Let's also not forget that, except in very small places in the West, wars are fought almost entirely by men. Men die at an extremely high rate fighting for the safety of women. It has only been in very recent history that women have been able to fight on the front lines in the United States, and still, you don't find women demanding to sign up for the draft when they turn 18. Yes, it's unlikely that anyone will ever be drafted again, but that's been a decades-long fear of boys that they would have to go and fight against their will, and women have never had to face that. But again, this is all about women's rights and women's issue, and equality has nothing at all to do with it.
Luckily, in the part of the world that I live in, the United States, I feel like women are seen as more valuable. My parents have me and I have an older sister, and they definitely do not think of us as inferior to guys. I feel like growing up, I was appreciated for my mind and my artistic talents, and I never felt like I was inferior to guys. And I think that that is really because my parents have equality in their marriage and they think of each other as equal. My dad views my mom not as inferior to himself or as intellectually inferior or anything like that, but they view each other as equal. And because of that, I grew up knowing that my worth isn't in my sex appeal.
Apparently, your parents have never read the Bible. Granted, I have no idea what their religious views might be, but extrapolating from what you've said about your religion, I think it's a safe bet that they're probably Christian, and as such, the Bible is quite clear that girls are not as valuable as boys. How do you get past this clear and present cognitive dissonance? I don't know. Like all other theists, you just adopt the ideas that you like and ignore the ones that you don't. How anyone with a desire for equality could continue to be a Christian is completely beyond me.
Something else that I wanted to end with that is social inequality I experience so often in the United States is the idea that emotions are weak and that having emotions makes you lesser and inferior. I'm someone who has extreme emotion.
No, really? You don't say. It isn't that emotions are wrong, but there is a time and a place for emotions, and every second of every day isn't it. However, women are, in general, more emotional than men, at least more openly emotional, and that's why women are drawn to things like religion and all kinds of crazy woo beliefs more than men, because women are less rational in general. Now, I don't want that to sound insulting. It's not meant to be that way, but wearing your heart on your sleeve all the time is going to get you criticized, and it should. If you can't think, if you can only feel, then you are not going to be a rational person, and rational people are the most important in this world.
I'm someone who has extreme emotion, so I have these big feelings, and I've been called crazy and emotionally bipolar by guys because of my emotions. Every guy I know refers to his ex-girlfriend as crazy, and it's kind of this insult that men and other women pin on women, that if someone has emotions and feels things that they're crazy. Because emotions aren't valued as much as rationality and as much as our minds are valued, it's weakening humanity.
There's a reason for that. Anyone who doesn't act rationally, who just flies off the handle and does things for no logical reason whatsoever, is crazy. Those whose emotional balance is way too far to one side are not emotionally centered. They go through life feeling and not thinking, and this is, whether you like it or not, a problem. Yes, you can be emotional, but running around in circles screaming because things don't go your way, that's an issue. And it's an issue that you need to deal with, and because lots of feminists do not deal with it, that's why they're considered insane. And here's some good examples.
You're fucking scum. You are fucking scum. Fucking rape apologist, incest supporting, woman hating, fucking scum.
Is there someone else you can wait to see me follow me?
You're fucking scum. Yeah, just another.
I just want to listen to someone else's opinion. I'm not even on a side here. I just listen to as many people as I can.
You know what though? Why would you pay money to fucking support a fucking rape apologist if you weren't fucking one?
I've never heard of saying anything that was.
Well, it's fucking scum.
If you shut the fuck up and let me read my list, there's the fucking proof.
And so I obviously can't like.
So, number one, shut the fuck up for a second.
So I can't.
Feminists do not want you to lose custody of your children. The assumption that women are naturally better caregivers is part of patriarchy.
Very good, you can yell. How about we talk rationally?
Get off the fucking campus.
Why do we have to get off your campus? What are you so afraid of? What are you so afraid of in the discourse?
Here, I belong. You're asking us that question.
I helped build this university.
So you're afraid of questions?
We're afraid of fucking fascists. We're afraid of you guys.
Really? So feminism having the only narrative is not fascist?
Down with fascists.
Feminism is about viewing women and men as equal, but it also is really empowering to men, because one of the most damaging things guys are taught growing up is that they shouldn't have emotions, they shouldn't feel things. My experience being friends with guys is that they feel all the same things that we feel as women. They just aren't allowed to express them because it's seen as a weakness. And the reason that it's seen as a weakness is because we view women who have these emotions as inferior. And if we didn't view women as inferior, we didn't view people who have more emotions and are more emotional as inferior, then that would also free men to be able to admit that they have emotions and to feel their emotions.
Nope, that's not why things are the way they are. Men have emotions. They tend to be more balanced, at least in my experience, and you're welcome to disagree. I don't mean to make this feel sexist, because it isn't. There are just real biological differences between men and women, and there are demonstrable differences in the brain that cause men and women to act differently. Emotions aren't the problem. Out of control emotions are. What Lizzie here is saying is that she wants men to be more like women. Well, why shouldn't women be more like men? Oh wait, she only cares about women. I forgot.
Not only are men taught to not have emotions, but they're taught to be sexually powerful over women and to have sex with more women, and instead of just viewing women as equal, if we view women and men as equal sexually, then guys won't have that on them anymore for an expectation of who they're supposed to be.
There's this thing called biology. Maybe you've heard of it? Men aren't taught to be sexually active. Their biology pushes them to do it far more so than it does for women. This is a proven fact. Now, I'm not saying that this is necessarily a good thing. The biological drive to reproduce certainly isn't of paramount importance today. There's plenty of people on the planet, and we don't need to produce more willy-nilly. But apparently Lizzie's never taken a basic class on human biology, and probably ought to get on that.
I think that as a feminist, the best thing you can do is become educated on these topics so that you can talk to more people about them, because right now in the United States, we really need to be working on social equality and using our words and our actions to treat men and women as equal and to accept each other for who we are, not for the stereotypes that we try to pin on each other. And so I linked a ton of stuff below, and if you go read it and check it out and talk about these things with your friends and the people in your social circles, I love you all so much, and I'll see you next Monday. Bye!
Lizzie needs to take her own advice and actually get an education in most of these topics, because clearly she has no clue what she's talking about. She's just bought into feminist stupidity, hook, line, and sinker. If you want to go look at her sources, the original video is linked in the description, but don't expect much more than the typical feminist screed. Rational people just don't take sources at their word. They go out and research their sources to find out if they're actually credible, and so many that these feminists put out there, so many of their ideas have been completely discredited, yet feminists continue to use them anyway. In that, they're pretty much identical to the religious, who keep pushing the old, tired, and entirely disproven claims, no matter how many times people point out just how idiotically wrong they are. I know Lizzie is wrong, but there's no time like the present for her to get a real education so she can know she's wrong too. I don't know how much else needs to be said. This was pretty much what I expected, a largely uneducated, ignorant rant about things that just aren't so. But there's a far left-wing element in most American colleges that pushes these kinds of lies on the gullible and the credulous. It's not their fault. They're expecting a real education, complete with facts and evidence, instead of the social justice warrior indoctrination that they actually receive. And it's sad that not only don't they get it, they don't even know that they've been handed a bill of goods. Thanks for sticking around for this long video. I hope you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe, and share, and of course, comment if you have anything to say. If you have any ideas for other videos, be sure to send them my way, and remember, equality is a two-way street. If you only want equality for your side, as modern feminism unequivocally does, then you're not out for equality, you're out for superiority.